In a previous clip, we did a recording whereby we used Excel to produce a budget for 2021 for the Navan Nutrition Society. So in this simple budget, the idea was that the organisation had an opening balance of 11,700 in January, and then each month it took in the exact same amount of money for these 8 items. So the amounts of money didn't change. Likewise, for expenditures, we paid out the exact same amount of money each month. And then this area at the top, I call the planning area or the input area, where I have my labels and my values, my numbers and my labels. And then in the solution area, all that's appearing down here are formulae or cell references. So in other words, if I change some of the values in the spreadsheet, some of the input values, the main spreadsheet automatically recalculates. So we'll say rather than an opening balance of 11,700, if we reduce it by 1,000 to 10,700, we'll see the effect here on all the other opening balances and elsewhere in the spreadsheet. So we'll just make it 10,700. And you notice that all of the opening balances elsewhere in the spreadsheet have gone down by €1,000. And the same would have applied to the total available and the closing balance and so on. So that just shows the value of having proper cell references and good formulae in your spreadsheet. The other thing about the first version of the spreadsheet is that those cells that are shaded in yellow, they're the cells where we built new formulae, and then we could replicate them across to the remainder of the spreadsheet. I forgot to color this one here for the total available, so I'll just shade that. So in this spreadsheet, I actually only entered 2, 1 is 3, 2 is 5, 6, and 2 is 8 formulae. I only built 8 formulae, and that then was used to complete the spreadsheet. So using that approach and the proper blend of absolute and relative cell addresses, you minimize the opportunity to make mistakes. The more formulae you enter, the higher chance you have of making a mistake. So this approach of the proper blend of absolute cell addresses or mixed cell addresses improves the chances of doing it properly and quickly. The one thing I forgot to do in the previous spreadsheet, previous screencast, was to those last few rows to format them as currency. So I'll just format them as currency before I start doing the second version of the forecast. So the initial spreadsheet, as I said, was based on the idea that the amounts of money you spend each month are constant, that they don't change. So therefore, if you look at the totals for the incomes, each month of the 12 months, the income is exactly 810. And then for each month, the expenditure value is also constant. It's 9105 for each of the 12 months. Now that may not hold true in certain organizations. The amount of money you take in may be going up or going down each month. So in this question, the assumption is that the amount of money is going to be increasing. So the initial forecast was based around the values here in this part of the Word document where the question outlined that the amounts of money remain constant each month. So that solved part A. Part B, on the other hand, is asking us to make a copy of the worksheet with the solution to part A, then modify it and incorporate the changes for the other months of the year from February onwards. So we're making the assumption that for January, the original values hold true. So what you saw in the previous screencast still apply to January. But from February onwards, the membership subscriptions will go up by €400 each month. The conference income will go up by €300 each month. Likewise, the expenditures, they will increase each month for the 12-month period. So we want to now build in a second version of the spreadsheet to incorporate those changes. So the first thing we should do is, assuming we've got the first spreadsheet built correctly, is make a copy of it. So down here I have my tabs. So each tab will be a different copy of the worksheet, and so I've this one is called NNS_A solution. So that's for part A of the question, where the amounts of money are constant. So I'm now going to make a copy of it by right-clicking on it, choosing the option to move or copy, and then I'm going to choose the part A solution, create a copy of it. Make sure you choose the correct sheet to do that. Hit the OK button, and it'll label it number 2. So I'll move it over to the right of the initial solution, and I'm going to just relabel it as B. So it'll be, I'll get rid of the 2, and I'll also label it as B. So it'll be NNS Part B solution. So each sheet has to have a unique name. So one of them is called NNSA solution, and the other is NNSB solution. So in order to make the changes, I'm going to have to do a number of things. The main one is, at the start, is I'm going to have to basically cancel everything from February onwards. So I'm going to highlight all the cells from February onwards and delete the data. And likewise, highlight all the cells for the expenditure items from February onwards and delete the actual formulae or cell references that are in there. And then I'm going to have to go back, and I'm going to have to add in my planning area, in my input area up here where I have the various incomes and expenditures. I'm going to be adding in the increase amounts in column D here. So I'm going to use column D as the place where I'll put the increased values beside the original values. So as I said, there are my incomes. And below my incomes down here are my expenditures. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use this block of cells to the right of the income to put in the increase amounts for each month. I'll just give it a slightly light shade of blue there, and the same for the expenditures. That's where the increase amounts are going to go, and then I'm going to have to rebuild my formulae to reflect that adjustment. So I'm going to go back to the Word document. I could manually copy and paste stuff or manually enter the values from the Word document, but it's much easier just to copy the values. So the order of the items, the various income sources and the various expenditure sources are in the same sequence as they were in the original part of the question. So membership subscriptions is still number 1, conference, seminar income is number 2, etc. So by just copying the numbers for the increase amounts from the Word document and then jumping to the relevant slot in the spreadsheet, I can just paste them in quickly and accurately. So there are all the increase amounts for the incomes. So we'll just put an increase label on them. The monthly increase, strictly speaking, is what I should label it as, but I leave it as it is. Okay, and then the expenditure items, they're going to be starting with insurance. So quick flick back to the Word document, copy the money amounts, and again they're in the same sequence. So when I flick back to the Word document, paste them in, or sorry, the spreadsheet, paste them into the spreadsheet. So now I have my increase amounts for my incomes and my increase amounts for my expenditures, and they're sitting directly beside their matching value for the original spreadsheet. And that'll actually make it easier to build the formulae as well. Because when we take these subscriptions now, we're going to want the January value to be the same as it was initially, so we can leave that as 2,200. But for February onwards, we want to increase by 400, sorry, and that'll mean the February value should be 2,200 plus the 400, making it 2,600. March should be 3,000. April should be 3,400, and so on. And the same pattern for the remaining items. So how do we do that? So we obviously want to say equals, and we have a choice here. We think we have a choice maybe. Do we use this cell reference for C32, or do we go back up to C3? And it's actually easier to use the C32 than the C3 when you're building the formula. So it's going to be equal to C32, sorry, and it's going to be plus the value in D3. So again, the question is, we need dollar signs around the D3. Well, if we put in this formula with D3 and we try to fill it to our right, it's going to change the D3 part of the formula to E3, F3, and so on. We want the C part of the formula to change. We want the C3 to become, or sorry, the C32 part of this formula to become D32, E32, and so on. So that part of the formula, the first part of it is moving correctly, but the D bit of it isn't. So we'll just undo some of this, and we'll go back in and then edit the original formula. And we want the D3 to be always fixed on the column D. We don't want to lock the row because the row will need to adjust for the remaining 7 items of income. So we press F4 a couple of times, and we want to lock the D part. So it'll be $D, but we leave the 3 floating or in relative mode. So that'll be the formula. And then if we fill this to our right, you should see the income amount going up each month by 400. And likewise, if we fill down the it should do the same calculation for all the other categories of income. So if you look at the conference income, for February it's going to be the C33 cell value plus D4. For March it's going to be the D33 value plus D4. So the E part of the formula, or the column part of the formula for the first half of it is going to adjust as we fill to our right, but the D3 reference, or the D reference bit, is going to stay constant on column D. But it will vary for 4, 5, 6, etc. for the different items of expenditure. So what we've done now is we've repopulated all the income sources for the remaining 11 months. So that's fine. I'll just underline them to make them more visually clear. I'll underline those cells. Simple underline, and then go down to the expenditure items. And the same approach applies here. The January values stay the same, but for February onwards, the amounts are going to vary. So to get them to vary, we want the insurance value to be the January value of C44 plus the increase amount of up here in D13. So we want it to be equals to C44 plus D13. And the question again is, do we need dollar signs or not? Do we need absolute cell addresses, cell references or not? So we press F4 a number of times so that we get to a situation where the D is locked, or the D is absolute, and the 13 is relative, or it's floating. So that approach, which worked for our incomes, will also work for our expenditure items. And they'll increase each month by the appropriate amount of money. And likewise, when we fill down to the remaining months of the year, it's going to also calculate the same, or follow the same process to calculate the venue rental fees or expenses and the printing and all the other expenditures. That's how to use MS Excel, we'll say efficiently and smartly, to deal with the case where you need to have a formulae that include a mixture of absolute cell addresses with dollar signs and relative cell addresses where you don't have dollar signs. So if you're unclear about how that exercise works, the best thing to do, in fact, is to go and rebuild the spreadsheet again and make the mistakes. Change the cell references, change the formulae, leave out the dollar signs, put in too many dollar signs, and see what happens. And by that trial and error, you'll figure out how to build the spreadsheet properly, and you'll know where the dollar signs go and where they don't go. So the last thing we can do here is, for each of the items of income and expenditure, we could total them up. So we'll put a total over here in column Q. Okay, perhaps it should go in column P, but column Q will be the handiest just because it's wide enough for the moment to do it. So I'll give it I'll make it bold and I'll make it blue. And then if I want to figure out how much I took in for over the 12 months on member subscriptions, I can use a sum function again to do that. So go up to auto sum, and it wants to sum up everything between C32 and P32. But I don't want all of those cells. So I can manually go in, or I can highlight just the cells I want over as far as N32. So my formula is now adjusted from C30, or so it reads as C32 to N32. And I press return on that, and the total income over the 12 months for member subscriptions is 52,800. Same approach applies to the other incomes. So I now can get them all. The total of, we'll say, lottery funding is 27,180. And a similar approach can apply to the expenditures. It's the exact same kind of calculation you're carrying out. So I can just go Control C with that formula, bring it down here to the insurance, paste it in, and it'll automatically adjust. It'll adjust the row label. So this formula for the other category was referencing C39 to N39, whereas my formula, once I copied it down, that number of rows adjusted to C44 to N44. So Excel has that inbuilt intelligence to adjust as you move a formula around the place. So the same pattern or same idea applies for my expenditure items over the 12 months. So to get the total for each of them, for a 12-month period, I just take my formula for insurance, get my crosshair in the bottom right-hand corner, and fill down. So in this spreadsheet, the only really new formula I've added entirely is the one up here for the total. Okay, you could argue this one is also new, but actually I could have filled the whole lot down and then deleted those 3 or 4 in the middle. So strictly speaking, that formula isn't new. It's a replica of one of those. It's a continued replication of it. So that's how you can use Microsoft Excel to deal with a situation where we have varying amounts rather than constant amounts. Varying amounts with an increase. Okay, there's a monthly increase applied. So if you contrast this spreadsheet to the earlier spreadsheet, in the first spreadsheet, the first screencast, there is a constant amount each month. And in the second case, in this case, we have the income and expenditures varying by a particular amount each month. So again, that shows how to use a mix of absolute cell addresses and relative cell addresses in Excel formulae. That's the end of the clip.